Call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. All right. Let's see, roll call. It looks like everyone is here. All supervisors are here. That's good to see. We have 2 YIG students, Olivia and Harsha. I didn't hear, Aksa, I'm sorry, is excused. She emailed me, JJ, I have not heard from him. Maybe he'll show up late, I don't know. Okay, citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments? I see citizens, but apparently there are no comments. Okay, citizen comments are closed. All right, any reports from committee members? Anything you want to mention? Anything? Any news? No? Okay, I just have a couple things, just a couple reminders. Remember Wednesday, October 16th at 5:30 p.m. at the Job Center, 8600 Sheridan Road, is our budget meeting. We'll be meeting with the division heads and of human services and other people as well. And we'll be going over our human services budget at that time. So make sure you put that on your calendar. Also, we may not have a November meeting. In fact, the November meeting is scheduled on the day of the election. So we're definitely not having a meeting on November 5th. And then the Wednesday and Thursday after, we have the 2 meetings in a row. We have the public hearing, and then we adopt the budget on the Thursday. So I'm not inclined to schedule anything. John, I don't know if there's any emergency things that come up at this point. No. So we'll just assume that we won't have a November meeting, okay? If something comes up, an absolute emergency, I'll let you know, but at this point, it doesn't look like it. Okay, approval of the September 3rd minutes. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look them over. If not, you can do it now. And if there are any corrections, additions that you would like to make, speak now and forever hold your peace. I looked it over, it looked pretty good. Okay, motion by Supervisor Nordigian, a second by Supervisor Brown. All those in favor of I'm sorry. Yes, YIG students.
There you go.
What say you?
Yes.
Aye. Okay, committee?
Aye.
Okay. The minutes are approved from September 3rd. Okay. Right, today, basically, we have 2 things. We have a resolution that we need to consider and vote on, and then there's going to be a presentation on adult and youth placements. First, the resolution to approve a health designated ARPA funds for the purchase of a liquid chromatography mass spectrometry instrument for the laboratory. That is a mouthful. Okay.
Is it supercharged?
I don't know. You'll have to find out. Okay. You may begin.
Okay, as you stated, these are ARPA designated health funds that we have been holding on to in hopes to purchase this piece of instrumentation. It will bring us, it's best way to describe it into this century. We have got to send blood alcohol. So we do forensic testing for our sheriff department and our police department when they take in drugs. And if we need to do confirmatory testing, so that we send out to the state lab of hygiene, that turnaround time can be anywhere up to 8 to 12 months because of the backlog that the state lab of hygiene has. So that delays the judicial system. Same thing for our urinalysis that we collect for our other divisions for DCFS, treatment court. Those are also tied to the judicial system as well. If we need to get a confirmatory test for that, we can't do that in-house now in our lab. So we send those out to Redwood Laboratories in California, which is a 2-week turnaround time for that process. This piece of equipment will allow us to do confirmatory testing in-house in our own lab. The cost is essentially a wash because of the sending out and supplies. So the machine cost is $380,000, and these additional supplies is $10,000. it's a really phenomenal upgrade to our lab and the way that we can practice for the services that we offer. This also does fentanyl testing, much as the piece of equipment does that we already have, but that's for clinical screening. This will be for confirmatory testing.
Yeah, if any of you get a chance to go to the lab, it's well worth it. I taken
Yeah.
a tour, it's very interesting. Supervisor Nadine and Supervisor Poole.
Thank you, Supervisor Chair, too. How many tests are we having to send out now?
I
Over
can,
whatever timeframe. I'm not
yep,
quite
yep.
sure.
In 1 year, we send out, in my packet. You'll allow me to hold for a moment. 401 tests. This was from, in
So
1 year,
30
23 to 24, 400
30 to
tests.
35 a month
Yeah.
approximately. And then what, do we have an overall cost of what those 400 tests, well, I'm sure we have to pay them something.
Yes, so our overall cost for setting them out last year
Yeah.
was $9,000.
Yeah. And then, is there any cost in there for training?
That's for training for our
For our
personnel,
people,
it's written into the contract.
So right now, we don't have anyone who's certified who can operate the,
We,
except maybe,
we would have had she not just resigned.
no.
So our lab supervisor just resigned for a better opportunity. She was commuting from Waukesha
Yeah.
and she got a job back in a private lab in Waukesha. So we're currently recruiting for that position right now.
And it might have been in here, I didn't read it, but, I mean, I didn't see it, but the, length of time from order to receipt and training and all that, what,
That's gonna vary based on how fast we hire a person. Although we could, it could be up to a year. Or it could be as quickly as 3 to 6 months.
9 months, depending on the qualifications of the
Yeah.
person we hire.
Because we also
Yeah.
we have to get it up and running, do proficiency
okay,
testing.
so to get the equipment, how long a period of time?
Well, we could have equipment by the end of the year.
Oh, okay,
So when we get there, then we'd have to validate that equipment.
Then you gotta validate it,
Into that
right?
Place,
right,
but our previous forensic chemist is using the same instrument and has offered to help us go through the validation process on a new piece of equipment we're getting.
and, the tests that we get out of this, will these also, contribute to court cases for, so
Yes.
it's really important that we have this right, because I know the other labs do,
Yeah.
and I'm all for having it here, don't get me wrong, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
But, the i's and t's have got to be dotted and crossed
Mhm.
and double dotted and
Yes.
crossed to me, because we're gonna have such a criteria put on us,
Yes,
to make sure everything's correct, because once incorrect, then the dominoes fall, right?
Mhm.
So, and we've never had anything like this.
No,
Well,
this is
and-
the technology.
yes.
So the state
Okay.
lab of hygiene or
Okay.
state lab, crime lab, just got 3 of these.
Yeah,
You know, for the volume they do.
And we are overseen by regulatory bodies.
sure,
So,
I understand.
yes,
And it is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Good.
it's pretty, for any forensic chemist, it's
Yeah.
standard, it's like specific, like software or whatever, but
Mhm.
this is an instrument that like every forensic chemist is trained on. to
Okay.
use, So.
Okay, so that's who we'd be looking for.
It's
then.
right, it's like,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Supervisor Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to the finance director I thought the ARPA funds were done as of June 30 or September 30.
No, they're not, but this is not the ARPA funds. This is not the 33 million that the county got. This was direct ARPA funds that went to the health department from the state. So this is different ARPA funds.
But it still hasn't expired.
December 31st, it will expire.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for that clarification.
So it's essentially, we need to use it or,
Is it?
yep.
Supervisor Kirby.
So will this just test for blood alcohol or does this test for
No.
other things too?
Any other, it'll test for, do all our urine testing for all of our drugs, blood alcohols. Yes,
Seems to be controlled substances too, that the drugs that the police officers might seize. We'd be able to find out what they are.
Okay. Thank you.
How many counties have spectrometry?
Well, this particular one is unique. We have a gas spectrum. We have gas.
We have gas,
And-
and now this is the liquid form.
Yes,
But from my knowledge, I think we're the only health department, because we're the only one with a crime lab. And that's because we've always had the support with the sheriff's and police department and the city paying for some of our personnel. So that's why.
Okay, that's the importance of it. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Supervisor
Just
Robinson.
As president of Board of Health, I'd ask for your support. We've been trying to do things like this. We've been trying to upgrade the labs for, I've been on for over 6 years, and we've been trying to upgrade our equipment for many years, as funds have become available. And as the ARPA funds came available, you know, obviously this is a big one, but the health department here is unusual in that we do so many different things. There are a lot of health departments that basically is a nurse on call. And we do so many more things than that. The lead, and there's just so many things that we do that, you know, this
Unique.
really,
yes.
it's really unique and it's really important. It's not just, you know, a nurse on call, not to minimize that, because there are many counties where that's, you know, their only healthcare. But, you know, to have, you know, the lead and the abatement programs and, you know, there are just a million things that
Our
we're,
large hub, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
a lot of things. So, you know, ask for your support and, you know, at any point, you know, doing more tours or finding out all of the programs that are going on, it's, you know, I encourage you.
Seems to me to be a good use of ARPA funds, frankly.
Yeah.
And the fact that it takes up to a year to get a result, it's just
It's,
unacceptable.
yes.
I mean, that issue
Yes.
alone is problematic.
Agree.
Well, and I have to state that if it's a blood alcohol and it's something that we were sent to the crime lab, we can't turn that around in 24 hours. That would take somewhere between 2 and 4 months, but that in itself is a great improvement from what we have now.
Any other questions? On the committee,
Move to
youth and governments, do you have any questions?
move to accept the resolution.
Okay, okay, resolution first by Supervisor Northigian, a second by Supervisor Robinson. Yes,
I just want to bring up one thing. One of the reasons, obviously, for everything that we've talked about is a good reason to support them, but in order to have a properly run anything, I don't care what it is, a lab, we have metallurgical stuff and all that. You don't always have to have the highest and best and newest thing, but you gotta have the right stuff. If you don't have the right stuff, you don't come out with the right results. You don't come out with the right results, it's a lot more dangerous. Here, I mean, we could blow up nuclear power plants for us, you know, so we gotta have the right stuff. And we wanna make sure we've got the right stuff. And I think this is a really good addition to the health training funds, everything that we do and how long it takes. And it's almost a no-brainer at this point. So.
It actually may be a service that we could offer to other counties.
And I was gonna bring that up too,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, it may eventually be something that may be a revenue generator for us.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Youth and governments, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, committee?
Aye.
Okay. Resolution passes.
Thank you, everybody.
Unanimously. Okay, next. We have presentation by Mr. Jansen.
Thank you. Rebecca and I will kind of go over, give an overview of placements because we know there's some new committee members and we wanted to, as you head into your budgets, our budget in the next couple of weeks, we wanted to give you kind of a quick overview of what placements are and how people end up there. And then a review of the cost, because when you review our budget, and if you look at the sheet that is in the packet, take a look at it. You'll also see that rising cost for 2025. So I have a few of those in there. So the first document that we included in our packet tonight, and I'll talk about the youth placements and Rebecca is going to talk about the adult placements, but was a definition of what it is when we talk about placements. And placements are court ordered. So these are things where kids have gone through or adults have gone through the court system, and it's been deemed that they can no longer be with their primary care provider and are in need of other type of help or assistance. And that can be, you'll see on the one sheet, the definition for foster care, which is really taking a child out of their home and putting them into another home to provide support. We have treatment foster care, which is foster care by its basic definition, but also for those children who need additional help and services. So you'll see a higher cost for that. We have group homes in our both adult and youth world, but in the youth world is for kids that need a little more structure in a home-like setting. So it can be up to 8 youth in a group home that are receiving a variety of services depending on what their needs are, which would include therapy, supervision. Generally, when you're in a group home, I don't think there's really many left here in Kenosha that do anything for the youth, so it's outside of Kenosha, but you're going to school in whatever school district that is, so you're not receiving that school work or in that home. So you are a little more outside of the home on a regular basis. Residential care centers, RCCs, or RTCs, residential treatment centers, are the same thing, and that's 24-hour care for children and adolescents. And there you're going to facilities where you are living in that facility with a number of other youth, receiving services for anything from mental health to alcohol and drug treatment to behavioral needs, emotional needs. And those are very structured settings. They are not locked, but you receive everything there. So your schooling is done there, your therapy is done there, your whatever group interactions you have are all in that type of facility. When it comes to kids that need a little more structure, and this would be for our youth justice kids, what we used to call delinquent youth, you have long-term detention, which is called in Racine County, Alternative to Juvenile Corrections, the ACE program. And that is, designed for kids who've had serious charges that need a lot of structure and issues addressed while locked up. So these are locked facilities. You are not getting out without a court order that you can earn up through a number of different steps, weekend passes and stuff like that, but that's all approved through the court process. In those programs, depending on where you're going, the ACE program generally is about a 4-month program in Racine, but they can go up to a year depending on the circumstances and what that child is experiencing. The ACE program in Racine is closing December 31st, and they're opening up a new facility, which is called CIRCE, it's the acronym. That stands for Secure Residential Care Center for Children and Youth. It's funny that they say children because it's also a locked facility, type 2 correctional facility as opposed to a type 1, but that'll be a facility where youth are determined to need to be locked up and put in custody, but they'd also receive treatment in that facility. So they're getting their schoolwork, whatever issues that need to be addressed through therapists are also part of that program. And so you're just not sitting, quote, doing time like in an adult system. And the most structured facility is our type 1 facility run by the state. And there are 2. There's one for girls, Cooper Lake, and then the one for boys is called Lincoln Hills. And people have probably heard of that. That's up in Irma, Wisconsin. It's 4.5 hours away. And that is a type 1 correctional facility where you are once again locked up and receiving services in that building. When you get into some less structured things, you have what's called independent living, and that's for kids that are 17 and up to 21 that for whatever reason cannot be in their home, but need to start learning how to live on their own. So we have a program we contract with Kenosha Human Development Services, and they put these kids up in apartments and provide a lot of services and case managers to them so they can get their feet on the ground and start heading in the right direction there. Another temporary placement that we use in the youth system is shelter care. That is non-secure, and it is for temporary situations where a kid where it may be a crisis situation or the kid got in trouble. It hasn't kicked up to the need of having to lock them up in the detention center, but we need to pull them out of that family or get them stabilized. The shelter care is here in town. They would go to their school, and be bused and picked up with the goal of getting them back either home or to, another location to continue to meet their needs. So that takes care of the youth, parts of that, but I just want to flip over to the dollars. So you can see on this chart in front of you, we took a look at the top section is the youth placements. You'll have the 24, what we budgeted and what we're looking at in 25. Those rates you see there are daily rates. So for example, I'm going to use a little ruler type thing. Regular foster care budgeted in 2024 is $24 a day, and that rate can be lower than that or higher than that, but that's the average rate of what we're looking at. And we budgeted for 145 kids. When we put together our budget here in June, that you'll see shortly, we have budgeted for 175 because our numbers are going up in foster care, and the rate up to $25 a day now. So you'll see an increase in the cost there of 1.2 to a projected budget of 1.5 in 2025. Just working our way down, subsidized guardianship is still at a rate of $20 a day. That rate is paid by, along with kinship, we get reimbursed for the state for that. Kinship is $375 a month, and the state pays for that. The number of kids you can see is pretty steady there at 178 that are in kinship placements. Treatment foster care, which I mentioned earlier, we're budgeting, we had 44 budgeted this year, we're looking at 36, and that was based on what we were projecting for the remainder of what we've seen so far in 24. And that daily rate is going to go up to 180 a day. So you'll see an actual drop in the budgeted amount, but an increase in the daily rate. Group homes, we've dropped our numbers there from 7 to 3, looking at 2025, with that rate remaining at $300 a day. So you'll see a reduction in our budgeted amount there. Shelter care, which is that temporary facility here in town where kids go, they can go up to, I think they can hold up to 8 kids in that facility. We're budgeting 5 this year, but looking at 6 next year, and their rate is going to increase to $553 a day. And then independent living, which for the older kids, we're looking at a budget of 4 into 25 with the daily rate has dropped down to 140 a day. Independent living skills is just a program that we get reimbursed from the state. So any kid 15 and older that is in an out-of-home placement, we contract with kids to go out and start talking to those kids about what is a budget? What does it look like to live on your own? How do you what are your goals moving forward, or your educational and attainments and things like that, to get them thinking about their future, with the hopes that most of those kids do end up going back home. They aren't a straight line into independent living, or else you'd see a much higher number there. But it's a program that the state requires us to provide, and we get reimbursed through there. A big ticket item is our residential care center. We budgeted for 8 this year. We're looking at 5 next year, but you'll see that daily rate of $900 next year. And that's what we've been experiencing. Residential care is very difficult to find in the state of Wisconsin for kids that we've had. We've had some as far out as New Jersey. We've had them in Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. And those rates are controlled generally by the states that set those. So the state sets our residential, our foster care rates, group home rates, and things along that line.
John, why don't we see residential care in Wisconsin to the degree that other states have it?
Well, there used to be a lot of facilities in Wisconsin. I think as people pulled out and decided there was better ways to try to meet those needs, they just weren't getting the referrals and able to keep their doors open. So now we have kids with very significant needs that the centers that we have here just aren't ready to take that next step. So the state's been in conversations with counties and these centers about how do we get you up to the level of being able to deal with some of these behavioral health issues and things that we're seeing on the ground. Some of our kids that end up in these facilities also have significant disabilities, unable to communicate, physical disabilities and things along that line. That we do have a facility here in the state that certainly has taken some of those, but a lot of times they get put into other places in a much higher rate than $900. That's just our average. So that can be a very expensive endeavor. The ACE program, which I mentioned, is the Alternatives to Correction program that Racine is currently running. Actually, the Racine program goes away in 25. However, there are two other ACE programs in the state, one in Fond du Lac and one in Eau Claire. So we're still budgeting a number there. The 625 is the rate that we've had through Racine. And hopefully, if we need to use that, we'd be able to access Fond du Lac and or Eau Claire. Certainly Fond du Lac being closer would be our first choice. But we kept that number in there for reasons that not every kid is out. You don't want every kid that rises to that level. Doesn't mean they're actually a corrections placement, because those are for your high risk kids. And we all know if you put low risk kids into high risk programs, things don't go well. So we want to continue to have those options. Our corrections number, which is the state run, Lincoln Hills and Copper Lakes, is remaining at 3. However, they're raising their rate up to $1,300 a day. So you can see what that translates to in the budget. Institutes, we zeroed that out. It was 100,000 in the budget. However, that number got transferred over into the adult, our behavioral health unit right now. And institutes are this like Mendota and Winnebago. Those are state hospitals. Moving down the line, we got the Racine County Youth Development Center, which is the CERC I talked about, the Secure Residential Center. We've negotiated a $1,000 a day rate with them and are looking at, roughly 2 kids into that pool. So that's an overview. So you can see where we budgeted in 24 for 12.3. We're looking at 12.6 million going into 25. And a lot of, like I said, these are not costs we control. We certainly, when a kid goes into placement, we're always working on what's the next move. We have a lot of case planning, a lot of reviewing, making sure that these kids are getting their needs met there. If they're getting close to you're working on discharge the minute they go in. In some situations, parents have a lot of court ordered conditions they need to comply with before a kid comes back. But there's always somebody looking at these kids and figuring out where the next stop is. So that's an overview of the youth placements. I don't know if anybody has any correct questions on that.
Thank you. So are the 2024 actual numbers, or this was the
That was
adopted
the
budget?
budget. That was the adopted budget.
Okay, so do we have actual numbers where we're at as to why we went to 30 more for the regular foster care, or, -3 on subsidized guardianship, I think it is. Why we had these plus or minuses? I mean, what's the rhyme and reasoning for that? I'm not questioning the numbers. I just don't know the process.
So really what that is based off of, what we were looking at when we did the budget in June was where are we right now with
Yeah.
the number of kids in placement?
Okay.
And some of that is we're getting an increase in our children and family services world, with the opioid epidemic that we got going on. Certainly we're seeing more neglect and kids coming into the system where the parents just aren't able to care for them. So I think that has helped that number, has assisted that number in going up. And then the others are fairly stagnant when you look across the board.
When I was on judiciary and law, and it was right after the pandemic, one of the things were getting children placed in, permanent homes, if you will.
Mhm.
So we had, allowed extra money for, an attorney.
Mhm.
Is that where some of these, because at that point, that was what was happening, and then they backed off on it for this year, because they said, we are at where we normally are at.
Correct. So that number hasn't trickled up to where it was before, where we worked on hiring the DA to help with these are TPRs, termination of parental right cases.
Right.
So it's kids that have been in care for a while that parents have not been able to comply with their conditions of return, and adoption then becomes the option for those children. When that was occurring, there was a big backlog. We're not there right now.
We're not there now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is not what's driving these numbers right
Okay.
now. But we're very cognizant of that and work closely with our district attorney partners
Right.
to make sure we're trying to stay up on top of that. If it becomes an issue, we certainly would be talking about it here and then in judiciary and law if we had to go over there.
So these numbers, you're, I won't say really confident, but this is how you always look at your budget every year then, right? Somewhere around June, you're looking at it so you can get your budget for that next year.
Yep, and we're projecting
Yeah.
out where we're at in June and then shifting.
So I don't know, and I know we'll see that coming up, but then we can see where you're at then
Mhm.
at that current time that they did those numbers then. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Big students. Are we good? Okay,
Well, we got
Rebecca,
the adult
you're next.
So the adult side is different and the same all at the same time. So it's the same in fact that we start discharge planning the minute we have somebody who goes into any type of court ordered setting. We certainly want people to be in the least restrictive environment that they can be in. However, there is a portion of our population that requires living in with a little bit more supervision than others. And that could be for the reason that they have, a longstanding mental health history that's just complicated for them to manage and they need oversight with medication, or they're somebody who has risky behaviors that oftentimes puts themselves in more of a risk. So when you look at our placement options, we do not have people that are ordered into adult family homes or community-based residential facilities. Sometimes we have terms and conditions with people who are chaptered that they have to comply with the treatment of taking their medications or meeting life's daily needs. But they're not ordered into these two placements. We oftentimes use these placements for people that have had a history of being unable to function well in any other environment. So these are folks that have had lots and lots of chapters or been in and out of the system, and they really just need that extra oversight. The adult family home is a small facility. Those are 3 to 4 bed facilities. We have several of them in Kenosha, and there's lots of them in Racine that we contract with. These are people who oftentimes don't need to live there permanently. I mean, we're always working towards discharging the person back into the community if we can. But there are oftentimes people need that extra help, just that level of supervision that they cannot get in their natural environment. A CBRF is a bigger facility. That's going to be a license. These are both licensed facilities by the state of Wisconsin. These are also folks who need that extra level of care. Typically, if they're in a bigger facility, they're able to do with a little less than they are if they're in a smaller facility where they need that individual one-on-one attention more. These are folks that oftentimes can manage their appointments in the community by themselves, but they're struggling with taking their medications. And we all know that that's one of the things we hear the most about people with mental health issues is they feel not so good on their medications, so they stop taking them, and then we cycle back around again. So placements in CBRFs and adult family homes are usually for our people who we are really concerned that they're going to struggle and perhaps slide backwards if we aren't providing that level of care in the community. The IMD, or the Institute for Mental Disease, that is, again, a state definition. Those are the state facilities in those cases, although there are some private facilities that are licensed as IMDs. If you've been around for a while, you know that we went into a contract with Lake Behavioral Health Hospital last year. This was the first time that we've been able to contract outside of our state. And if you look at our budget, you will see that the cost difference is pretty astronomical. When you're talking about Winnebago or Mendota, you're talking, $1,400 a day versus the negotiated rate we have with Lake, which is $850 a day. Now, not every person can go to Lake Behavioral Health Hospital. Oftentimes, if they're someone that is aggressive or dangerous, Lake, because they're a private hospital, isn't going to be able to meet their needs. So those are the folks that are going to go to Winnebago or Mendota. Winnebago is our most utilized facility. That's where most adults go if they're under a Chapter 51 and they have to go to that level of care. Mendota is kind of a specialty hospital. Although they are still considered an institute for mental disease, they have the forensic unit, which is people that are there for criminal charges that are being looked at to see if they're competent to actually stand trial, or they're regaining their competency to stand trial. They also have a geriatric unit there. So their geropsych unit is where we see the most of our days. So these are for some of our older population or our population that has physical needs that can't be met typically by Winnebago. So these are going to be people that have maybe need to use a wheelchair or a walker for mobility, or they have, some other coexisting concern that doesn't meet their needs to be on a general population in Winnebago because they're a little bit more at risk because of their physical health.
Rebecca?
Yeah.
You said Mendota and Winnebago are state facilities.
They are.
And behavioral, Lake Behavioral and Waukegan is private. It's interesting that the private one is a lot less expensive.
Correct. That's a negotiated rate.
It's a long negotiated thing with the health
Yes.
department and
Yes.
I mean, that's a great deal. My initial response is, normally private places tend to be more expensive than state facilities.
Yeah,
So boy, and it's close too. So
it's closed.
Which
It's
is good for the
a,
family.
boy, that was a great.
it's a great alternative for our folks to go to. It keeps our law enforcement officers on the road
Right.
and it's certainly a better setting
Don't have to
for
drive
our
hours
folks.
north and, yeah.
Yeah, and it's easier to do discharge planning when someone's natural supports can be a part of their treatment when they're at Lake versus it's really hard when they're 2.5, 3 hours away to be involved in the discharge planning,
Right.
which is oftentimes where you see people have to step down into these smaller facilities because they just aren't ready to go home yet, but they really don't need to be in the institute at that point in time. The care center is the next one, and that's actually kind of brings us right to that. That's our crisis stabilization unit. The care center has been in business for, when did we start that?
A while.
A while.
2016?
Oh, no, it's been longer.
Was it
than that.
longer than that?
They moved over
They
here.
moved in that timeframe? Okay. So it's a licensed CBRF by the state of Wisconsin. It's 16 beds. It's the goal of the stabilization center is twofold. It's number one, for people who don't need to go to the institute, but really need that extra level of care. So, someone perhaps who has making some suicidal ideations, they're really not safe in their own home, but they're not someone where there's a designated plan where they perhaps need to go to some place where they're locked up. The care center can provide that 24-hour care, get them stabilized on medications. They can see a provider. Resources can be put in place and they can just be stabilized. Again, they can always move to a higher level of care. It's hard when you've been at that high level of care. It's harder to get down faster than it is if you step up. Also, too, we use this as a facility when someone is ready to be released from Winnebago or Mendota. But again, they just aren't ready to go back into the community yet. Resources need to be arranged, or there's, some family circumstances that we want to make sure that things are really set for them to go back home so that they don't end up back in the situation that they are in. The care center is often used for that as well. We also have supported apartments, and this is the least level of care of someone outside of their home. This is someone who's residing in their own apartment that perhaps has people coming in to help them. So they'll have like a comprehensive community services worker who comes in to help them with their daily needs, or they have a provider that's coming in to help them take their medication. It's just, again, a step down into being into their natural supports, which is in the community. When you look at our budget, placements are something over the years that we have gone up and down with. They were on a dramatic incline for many years. We stabilized them for a while, and now we're starting to see them go up again. And again, when someone is detained under Chapter 51, that's a detention that law enforcement makes based on a person being at a certain level. It is approved by our crisis department. So they work in tandem for somebody to be detained. But those are placements that we really, as human services, don't really have a whole lot of control over. If someone is at that level of care, they need to go somewhere to be able to receive the treatment and the care that they deserve. So you'll see the numbers for Mendota and Winnebago. We don't go by, I know we track number of children in the child world. In the adult world, we track days of care. And the reason for that is we have a lot of people who unfortunately end up going back and forth. So if you track by people, it wouldn't look like a real number. Days of care is a little bit more consistent with how you see what they're looking for. So Mendota is, again, that specialty hospital, although it is an IMD. We don't see a lot of people that have to go there. Unfortunately, when people do go there, they are there for a while. And that's because typically it's hard to place someone who has physical needs as well as co-occurring behavioral health needs. So they tend to stay a while, which is why our days of care, there are very few people, but it can be an extenuating number of days. Winnebago, our numbers have jumped. As you see, we looked at about 1,382 budgeted days for 2024. We bumped that up to 1,700 for 2025. Lake, the reason why that is low for 2024 is we did not have that contract with them until through the year. So we did not have that many people placed, and then we bumped it up certainly for next year's budget. Aurora and Ascension are also hospitals where a person can go for treatment. We certainly try every place that we can that will accept them before we have somebody go to Winnebago because it's just so far away. But oftentimes the level of care is not able to be reached at those two facilities. So you see less and less. Aurora, we don't even have budgeted for 2025 because we just aren't.
Walking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, right. Ascension's All Saints is the one in Racine, so we try to have people go there. Unfortunately, oftentimes when we're looking for placements, it's for people that they're just not able to care for, or they don't need to take them. They can kind of pass on them because they've got other people there. The care center is a contract that we have with KHDS, so you'll see that the days and the rate are going to stay the same because that's what we budget for. And then when we talk about residential varied rates, an adult family home can be as low as $89 a day, and it can be all the way up to $300 and some a day. So it's hard to give a cost estimate on that because it varies depending on the facility that the person is in. Our behavioral health team is always looking for new contracts with new providers so that we can have this, breadth of facilities for people to go to, but there is just such a variation in services that are provided and needs that they can meet that the range is pretty large when it talks about adult family homes and CBRFs. So you will see that our budget is also going up for placements. We are budgeting a 500,000 roughly increase for 2025. Again, sometimes we can control some of these things, and oftentimes we can't control what for placements, what comes in our, depending on what the person's needs are in the community. We can control them stepping down into these different levels of care as they able to do that. But the detentions are something that are really outside of our ability to control.
Most of the state hospitals are set, right? The rates.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. We don't
But
negotiate
private, we
rates.
can
They tell us.
Negotiate.
Correct,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
What, so through
Supervisor
the
Brown.
chair, please, to Rebecca Dutter, how come the rates for both Mendota and Winnebago, you indicate the base rate is one thing, but
Right.
the rate is a
That was
different
my
thing
question,
if
too.
we're not negotiating?
So I,
That's reimbursement.
yeah,
So we do get some reimbursement. They are able to bill insurance, then we get some of that money back. So what you see is the base rate set by the state and what it actually ends up costing us here in Kenosha County.
Again,
Go ahead.
the care center,
Mhm.
their rate didn't change. And I appreciate that it didn't change, and yet everybody else on here has an increase with the exception of the care center. Can you speak to that?
I think there will be a slight adjustment. I don't believe that the number for 24 that we budgeted was the final number that they were given for their contract. So this was more in line with what they're actually utilizing for 2025. Certainly, we understand that they have to pay their employees more, and the cost of insurance goes up. I believe in 2024, it was when we were doing our contracts or we were doing our budget in mid 2024, we were probably we were padding it a little bit, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but we are so uncertain of what insurance costs are going to be for some of our providers that we tend to put a little bit more in there and then hope to come in a little bit less if they don't need that. And I think 2025 is much more real. We were able to get numbers a little bit earlier from some folks about what costs are going to be.
Thank you.
Sure.
And my last question is regarding Lake Behavioral. So you said we didn't have that agreement in 2024, but I thought we did.
The whole year. We
thought
didn't
we
have
did.
it for the whole year.
This
I
number
thought we
you're looking
did.
at here.
I'm looking at press releases that say that the pact started, well, it was
So-
signed in March of 2023.
Right.
Correct.
then
So the
9
agreement, but
months
what
we
this
didn't
is
do it.
referring to is a new agreement we have with them on taking uninsured. So the insured, if you're on MA or an insurance,
They were taking those starting.
there's no cost to us,
Right.
but we
Okay.
knew we had this other group out there that were ending up in places more expensive. We said, hey, can we enter into negotiation about covering some of that at a much more reduced rate, as pointed out by Supervisor Frankel, than Mendota or Winnebago.
Right.
So this is that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm done.
Supervisor Poole?
Yeah, a couple of years ago when I was on Human Services, we had, I think, 2 patients that cost us $1 million apiece.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah, we had a person in one of the state institutes for 7 months this year. And that's a big price tag when you start doing the math on that. So every once in a while, we get these deep end placements that drive the budget into a direction of significant expenditures. We are always looking at those cases and trying to move them along, and found a place for this person recently. But you'll see that on the youth side, and some kids ended up in these residential centers for a couple years at a high rate. Will drive that number. And on the flip side, the adult side, when they end up, as you pointed out, in these deep end, expensive placements. Yeah.
Oftentimes those are forensic units at Mendota, and also the geropsych unit at Mendota. So the gentleman that was one of those that was, cost us a significant amount of money was because he was a forensics case that ended up being a 51, and then he would go back to a forensics case, then he would become a 51 again. And it was just it was a challenge to work with that situation. I don't know that let's hope we never see that type of situation again. But like John is referring to, we did have a woman that was at Mendota for several months because of just in the inability to place her in a facility where her needs could be met.
Supervisor Nordine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we see, children in these situations that end up becoming adults and then in these behavioral situations?
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's percentages or numbers that are, you can say, hey, 4% of the people, obviously we see it, children end up, and I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is, are there other things we could be doing to prevent that?
So we start planning with a lot of these youth right before they turn 17. If there's someone that has been out of state in a placement, we will start as early as 16, looking at what resources are going to be available to this person when they turn 18.
And
If
how
we
early
feel-
could they potentially be in?
Not until they're 18.
No, I mean, how early as a child could they be
Oh,
put
They
in
can be placed very early in their life.
when you say?
Yeah, but it's unusual for somebody to get placed like, let's say a 6-year-old and then live their life through.
That's what I'm.
Yeah,
getting at.
no,
So
that
that's not
doesn't,
a common occurrence.
yeah, that does not
Okay.
occur.
But
You don't
as you
get
them closer to the,
institutionalized.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a
you're
different
getting them out. So
situation.
It's mostly, you'll see like a 15-year-old
Yeah,
go into a
okay.
placement,
Okay,
spend 2 or 3 years. We know that they're gonna transition into the adult world.
Okay.
Is this a family care case? Is it, what other services can we provide to get him or her back into our community, or if need be, in one of the facilities she's discussed?
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Rebecca?
thank you.
Okay, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you for the presentation.
Well, that concludes our budget presentation.
Stop by for sandwiches on the 16th. Somebody might be bringing.
That was a smooth move. I saw what you did there. Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn?
Second. Oh.
Yes.
I thought you-
Gotcha. Okay, motion by Supervisor Nordine and a second
Second.
by Supervisor Poole. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Committee, aye. We are adjourned. We'll not see you in November, but we will see you
16th.
the 16th.